everybody, my name is Meg Treseder. I am the Adult Services Librarian at the Azle Memorial Library, and I am excited to present some of the books I've read this past month. Not all of them I loved. A few were pretty good, and then there are a few that I would not recommend. So I'm going to be brutally honest as always. And I'm still using the same rating system from 0 to 5. And I'm sorry, I apologize. I actually don't have any of the books with me because a good thing they're all checked out. So the first one is called Prayers for the Stolen by Jennifer Clement. And I gave this one a 4. Now, I must warn you, this is a sad, depressing, heartbreaking book, but it's beautiful, and I actually really ended up enjoying it. It's about a group of girls in a small town in Mexico, and they live kind of this brutal existence. You can die at any time from a snake bite, spiders, they have scorpions, AIDS is a big problem there. They have the government come by and dump pesticides on the town. And you can also be taken by the drug cartel. These young girls are stolen all the time by these cartels that just come into town and take whoever they want indiscriminately. So their mothers will actually make them unattractive by blacking out their teeth or cutting their hair short, and they never, of course, wear cute clothes because they don't want to entice anyone. So it's a story of this one young woman and 3 or 4 of her good friends, and then all of their mothers, and they're all friends, and you still manage to find some happiness in the story. They have good friendships, and the story lagged a little bit in the middle for me. She goes off on kind of this adventure, which I did not expect, and the story takes this drastic turn. But it has fantastical elements, beautiful writing, and really good characters that you end up caring deeply about. So I enjoy it, and I recommend it. The next one is called All the Old Knives by, and this is a hard name, I think it's Olin Steinhauer. I gave this a 3. It started out really well. You can tell he's a really talented writer. He paints things in ways that you can just imagine very easily. But there wasn't enough action. It's supposed to be this kind of espionage, spy thriller, and it got a little boring to me. So let me give you the premise. It's about, it actually is about 2 old friends meeting up after years of being apart. And they both used to be CIA operatives. One is still working for the agency, and his name is Henry. And Celia, his former lover, has left the agency to move to California. She's married an older man and now has children. So she has a very different life, of course, than she used to have working for the CIA. And Henry's come into town just for a visit, you know, to catch up. But we find out that he's actually there to gather information about this terrorist situation that went horribly badly. It was a hostage situation that ended just terribly. And it made the agency look very bad. And there was some suspicion that there was a mole in the agency. So he's investigating this years later and comes to ask Celia some questions. Now, the interesting thing is, they're both unreliable. They're both trained liars. So it's kind of fun to sit there and think, you know, who is the one that you can trust? Are they both lying? Are they both withholding information? So again, the writing is good. The premise is interesting. I think if you like old spy novels, you're going to like this one. I don't think you're going to like the next one. It's called Girl Underwater by Claire Kells. And I wanted to like it, but almost from the get-go. So it's about a girl and a young man and a young girl that are stranded. They're in a plane crash, and this plane crashes in the Rockies in the winter, of course. And they're with, I think it's 3 other young boys who also survive with them. They're the lone survivors. And these 2, the young man and the young woman, they're Avery and Colin. They are swimmers for this college swim team. And they aren't really friends, but they have a connection, and they have a little bit of history together. And so it goes back and forth in time between when they're trying to be rescued, you know, they're trying to just survive, and then after the rescue, once they're home. And there's this big buildup. Avery feels this immense amount of guilt for something that happened, and you're just, as the reader, thinking, what could have happened? You know, what could she have done on this mountain? And then you find out, and it's utterly anticlimactic. I couldn't have cared less. There was no reason for her to feel guilty. It was just a waste of time. The writing was cliche and overblown. Colin was way too perfect. No one is that much of a saint. I just did not enjoy it. So that's Girl Underwater. The next one is Impasse by Royce Buckingham. This one is just a fun read. I gave it a 3.5. And it's kind of this legal thriller meets survivor adventure story, which I love. So it's about Stu. And Stu is this brilliant but very nerdy, not very fit, not in shape lawyer. And he's just turned 40. And he's kind of gone through this fall from grace. He used to be this very successful, I think he was an assistant DA, and just had this terrible failure at work. He lost a trial case. It was a very public failure for him. And so he's barely scraping by. He kind of co-owns, he's a partner in this law firm with his best friend Clayton. And so Clayton was like, hey, I'm gonna give you this trip, this guy's trip to Alaska, just kind of a survival. We'll be dropped in a cabin for a week, survive, and then they'll pick us back up. And so last minute, Clayton can't go. So Stu goes by himself. And so he's dropped off at this cabin, and he probably has less survival skills than I do. It's bad from the get-go. He immediately injures himself. He barely ekes through to the end of the week. And the plane doesn't come though, and Stu realizes that someone is trying to kill him. They've just left him to fend for himself out in the wild. So he hooks up with this kind of grizzled mountain man who's this trapper and hunter, and it's kind of like those scenes from Rocky where, you know, he's chopping wood and like running up mountains, you know, to get into shape, and that's what happens to Stu. Stu becomes really strong and fit, and he learns how to survive because this man is teaching him. So I loved that. That part was fun. Meanwhile, back at home, Clayton and Stu's wife, who's kind of this vain, superficial social climber, they're in cahoots to kind of take over the firm in Stu's absence. So Stu has to come back and figure out what's going on and make things right. And so it's just a fun kind of candy thriller. I really enjoyed it. The next one is The Bookseller by Cynthia Swanson. I gave this a 3.5. I was a little bit torn. It started out with such promise. The premise is really interesting. It's about a woman. She's single, I think in her 30s, in Denver in the 1960s. And she co-owns a bookstore with her best friend. And so, you know, she has this good life. She's contented. She's happy. She wants a family, but she's okay with where she is now. And all of a sudden, she starts having these very vivid, very strange dreams, where in her dream, she actually wakes up where she has this alternate life. And she's married with this perfect, loving husband, and these 3 kids and a huge home, and she's, you know, just happy and adored. And she starts spending more time in that world. You know, every time she goes to sleep, she visits this world. And it becomes hard to differentiate between the two and then decide which is real and which one actually that she wants more or that she prefers over the other. And so I think the author brings up great issues about a lot about marriage and motherhood and sacrifice. And also, what are you willing to give up to have the life that you truly want? And also, I think being brave and making brave choices in your life. So I enjoyed all of that. My main problem with the book was that there's supposed to be this conflict between 2 characters, and I never really bought into it. I just didn't care about it. It seemed contrived to me. And without giving anything away, at the ending, it was wrapped up too fast. I didn't love that. So I recommend this. I think it's worth reading. I just didn't love it. I can't gush about it. The last book is called Inside the OBriens by Lisa Genova. And this is the woman who's written Still Alice about Alzheimer's. And so she kind of has this formula where she will present a disease to you, to the reader, in a way that's not threatening, it's not scientific. I mean, it's easy to digest and understand. A person will get a disease and then have to deal with it, you know, come to grips with it, and then his or her family will at the same time. And that's what she's done here. And I would give this one, I think, I'm not sure if I said it, a 4. I did enjoy it, I think, as much as Still Alice. And here's why. With Still Alice, I think she concentrated appropriately enough on Alice. a little bit on the family, but more on Alice. And I think inside the O'Briens, because of the title, it was a lot more about the family and the dynamics between family members. I loved that. Joe is a cop in Boston, actually in Charlestown. And Texans think they have pride. Nobody beats someone from Charlestown. These people are obsessed. They live, breathe, die for the place they come from. And I loved that. It becomes a character in the story. But he's a cop, and he starts having some symptoms. You know, you see a scene early on where you think that's a little bit, there's something off about him and his behavior. And, you know, over the course of the book, he's diagnosed with Huntington's, which is a terrible, insidious disease that takes over your body. You have these weird, erratic, explosive movements. You can't stop twitching. And some people end up dying of starvation because they can't swallow. And you're moving so much, you're burning so many calories, and you can't get food in. And so it's a heartbreaking disease. And once you have it, and if you pass it on to your kids because it's genetic, if they get it, if they have the gene, they get the disease. So he has Huntington's, it's discovered. And he has, I think, 4 kids, and he has to tell them that he's got this disease and that they might have it too. And it's just heartbreaking the way he has to come to terms with it. And they have to deal with not only their father dying, you know, a slow, painful death over the next decade or so, but the fact they might as well, and they might pass it on to their own children. And I found myself tearing up, and I don't often cry when I'm reading. But I did for this one. It was surprisingly affecting. So there are really tender moments between family members, and it was just, that was beautiful to witness. I really liked the focus on family. And she's a great writer. She's not technical, and you still learn as the reader. You're still educated about the disease, something I had no idea. I had no idea about Huntington's and what it did to a person. So I really enjoyed it. I think if you like Still Alice, there's a good chance you'll like this one too. Thanks for tuning in again, and I hope you can read some of these and enjoy them as much as I did. Thanks.